A writer at The Hollywood Reporter said recently, the thing about directors with longevity is that they never sit still. They keep diversifying and trying different things. And I just wondered to what extent you'd agree with that with your own career.
Yeah, you got an old buddy actually wrote Blade Runner. And we'd have, after a heated argument, and, he'd have a doobie and I'd have a cigarette. He'd say, man, he said, art's like the shark. He said, if you don't keep swimming, you drown. Same goes for films.
And Exodus, truly epic, but at the heart, I think it's a character study of Moses. What was it that drew you to want to tell the story?
The massivity of the story and the character and what he laid out to himself. And I'd stood in front of the remains of Ramses about a year and a half ago, prior to me really taking this on board. So it's kind of coincidental, maybe it was Providence, that he was there lying in his casket and there was his skin. It was like parchment. And you can see the nose is covered in skin and the teeth are intact and the hair looks like it may have been hennaed or was kind of a gingery color, longish. And always with those things, it's shocking because he was real. This is a real persona. And he's 5,000 years old, so certainly Moses was that. Quite whether or not Moses was really connected, like half-brother to Ramses, was prior to it only really rumored. Moses being a military man, very capable, was probably pretty definite. And so we put those two things together and enabled us to kickstart the story quickly to get in to he who survives is liable to lead. So we went in with that early on. That was fairly a piece of invention. But pretty well after that, we kind of stood by the research given out by the Old Testament. And we stick pretty well to his story, more so than the original Hollywood versions, which tend to preempt where he's going. We like him to be ahead of us in his rejection and unsureness and fundamentally tearing himself apart as to what he should do and what he shouldn't do, particularly after he's been rejected and exiled. So then in constant denial of the facts of what are facing him, which are the presence of possibility of a higher spiritual thing that he ever allowed to be even considered into his scope of vision, because he was in strict denial of the propaganda of the thousand or so Egyptian gods that he knew were just stone and wood.
And you're working with Arthur Max and Janty Yates,
Sure.
Again, reunited with them.
Sure.
How does the scale and scope of what you're doing on this compare to what you did on, say, Gladiator?
I say I'm thinking about doing this, and they go, oh, God. And then some books come out, and we start staring at Egypt, literally. Then you start staring, always look at the original material. The scale of Egypt is just spectacular. And where does the architecture come from? Because you can't relate Egyptian architecture to any other form of architecture in history. You can't relate it to Greek. Mayan, you might be related to Egyptian architecture. Aztec, you might relate to Egyptian architecture. But definitely the Egyptian architecture is the big daddy and is the original thing. Why the pyramid? Why that mode of costume? Why the bling? Why the spectacular bling? Have you ever seen one of the best museums, the British Museum, but one of the best museums I've been into where the gold, the Egyptian gold is just spectacularly looked after, is in New York. You go to the Egyptian rooms in New York, it's like incredible that these things are 5,000, 6,000 years old. But, you do really wonder, were they from outer space? It's like just extraordinary. Where did it come from suddenly, just like that?
And when it came to setting the right tone for Exodus, Christian Bale told me that he watched The Life of Brian as an example of what not to do for his performance. But did you have sort of reference points there? Or
his point is that when you're doing a very serious subject, you've always got to find a point of humor, because otherwise you can get so serious that somebody's got to keep an overview and they're saying, wait a minute, we're getting way too serious here. So in the story, you add a couple of things like Ewan Bremner, and as is Indira Varma, who's playing a priestess, who's definitely full of it, and actually is is perpetuating the propaganda of mystery and mysticism and this and that, and of course they're definitely due for a good old hanging. So we keep that, and so there are only 2 points of humor in the whole film. But you know, when the sword's slightly longer than your arm, and you're saying, you're trying to get the sword out, and you get the sword out, then there's 300 people just ridden up behind you, and you can't get the point quite clear, so you go. So I have to say, cut, let's start again.
And you've described working with actors as a partnership, and obviously casting is always key.
Much more fun.
Why Christian Bale? And can you talk about the collaboration with him on the character?
Actors gradually rise to the surface, and through that, I've always felt like directors, you kind of swimming up to sunlight, and actors do the same thing. They work their way through. Some stop at certain levels, some come through, and then there's always some definitive moments in an actor's life which are indicative of a specific performance where they suddenly emerge. And I watched Christian emerge, through Batman. He really grew up, I think, through Batman, funnily enough, and which is an odd thing to say because it's such a comic strip kind of character, but that takes theatrical capability to pull that off. But then I watched him, particularly the fighter was kind of really interesting. Then you go to what I thought was spectacular was American Hustle. And I saw him, he's still carrying 50 pounds around his waist, and the biggest rapper you've ever seen. I said, Moses. He said, really? I
think he said this is the closest he's been to himself in terms of the voice and physicality.
Well, that's what he's like. Yeah, that's really him. Yeah. Actually, I thought, was it the Western 3:10 to you may start to really show what's coming, you know.
And you've described music as being the fourth dimension and almost like dialogue in the film. And I just wondered what you wanted Alberto Iglesias' music to say in Exodus.
Iglesias, I had never worked with, but I was very aware of his music. Particularly liked, a lot of I could never pronounce his name, but Almodovar. Is that the way to say it?
Almodovar, yeah.
I was very amused by a lot of his stuff in that, and clever use. And then I noticed he did a really good score for the John le Carré Tinker Tailor. And from that, I thought, let's give it a go, give it a whirl. But I think it did beautifully, spectacular.
And I know on Black Hawk Down you worked with 11 cameras. How many did you work with on Exodus, and why multiple cameras? And were you behind one of them?
No, it was 3D now. It's all 3D. And I only stopped operating when Video Assist became so spectacular. So I've now got, in my tent, screens not quite that big, but big ones, like 6 4-footers, all 3D, in what I call the tent. And they are representative of the 6 major cameras. If there's rest in the smaller screens, if there's 11 cameras, you've got 11 monitors. So doing the average dialogue throughout the film Exodus, the average daily use of cameras would be 4 cameras on the set all the time. And right now I'm doing Martian, where there's 3 cameras on set all the time, all shooting all simultaneously. But you gotta know what you're doing, otherwise you're just blowing away footage. It's not footage, but you're wasting time. But if you really know what you're doing, then that's how you can do Exodus in 74 days, as opposed to 130. That's what it should be.
Ridley Scott, thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.